Hi everyone, this is Dr. Koh, and today we have a very special guest speaker. It's Mike Sullivan. He's a family literacy specialist at Tulsa City County Library. Hi, Mike Sullivan.
Hello.
Okay, you want to say hi to my students?
Hello. Yes, I'm Mike Sullivan. I am the family literacy specialist. Tulsa is a little bit different than most cities in that the literacy department is run out of the library rather than a separate nonprofit of the Department of Education. So I'm both a librarian and a literacy person at this point.
Okay, so he'll be talking about every child ready to read and early literacy stuff. So he has a very nice presentation slide. So it's all yours.
Thank you. I very briefly want to go through not just what Every Child Ready to Read is, but where it comes from so you know a little bit of its background. Very briefly, I promise I will mention a lot of the history and the research, and then leave you to go and look up as much of it as you'd like. And then get very quickly to the practical side of what it is that I do when I go out and work primarily with parents and families of children ages 0 to 5. From birth right through the end of their preschool years. That's my job. That's what I take care of. When we talk about all this, what we call emergent literacy, it comes out of a ton of research that was done in the 1980s and the 1990s, based on a couple of real changes in that time period. The first being that there was all this talk about international competition. The brain gap and the reading gap were terms that people used, much like they used the term missile gap before, is that America is doomed because our students, of course, can't read as well as kids in other countries. All that yelling and screaming, put that together with a bunch of new technologies that let us actually look at what was going on inside kids' brains. One of the reasons there wasn't a ton of research on emergent literacy beforehand was it's hard to get any information out of a 2-year-old. Getting them to talk and give you responses in standard research is a little bit difficult. Once we ended up with things like the MRI, the fMRI, the functional MRI, PET scans, things like that, we didn't have to ask 2-year-olds questions. We could actually look inside their brain while we were giving them exercises and see what worked and what didn't work. The other big thing that really changed was suddenly the way that we did research changed. Educational research before the 1980s was absolutely nothing like what it's done today. In the 1980s, we started using some real hard science, the research methods of the medical field, and the psychology and sociology methods that had become very, very popular. And we started applying them to education, and suddenly there was a flowering of research, more than I could possibly talk about, but I'll flash some on the screen here for you. A couple of names you'll see over and over and over again. Jean Child being probably the most prominent. Susan Newman, still working today, doing wonderful work. I'll leave this. I'm sure you'll be able to see these slides later. You can go and read all this fascinating stuff on your own. I can guarantee you it'll put you to sleep, but it's really amazing stuff. What's more amazing than the research itself is how many different places this body of research ended up. And these are all names that should be familiar to you if you've been in the program at all for more than 6 months or will be at some point. Every Child Ready to Read is what I'm going to talk about today. Of course, everyone knows about No Child Left Behind. And if you know anything about Every Child Ready to Read, you might be amazed to see those two phrases on the same slide. But the same research backs up both of those things, as well as the work of Stephen Krashen. It's a great book, The Power of Reading. We're going to see a little bit later as well. Everyone knows Jim Trelease in the Read Aloud Handbook. Ralph Fletcher is the great writing expert, and Richard Allington is the one out there who's yelling about No Child Left Behind. And so he uses the same research that No Child Left Behind does. And by the way, my work, you will see a lot of these researchers show up in the bibliographies and the stuff that I do. And of course, what really got things going were some of the congressional reports that have been affecting education ever since. I'm not going to name them all, but look at that National Reading Panel report, year 2000. Everyone knows what came out of that. That was what launched No Child Left Behind. All of this was spurred on by that big body of research. And again, the same research produced some very different results. And Congress The congressional reports all focused on what it said about early learning skills, which is why when the Public Library Association decided to get into the act, they focused on skills as well. Every Child Ready to Read, if you're not familiar with it, that's the shorthand version. The actual title is Every Child Ready to Read at Your Library. But seeing as this program is used in so many different places, most people have sort of forgotten that library is right in there. But it comes out of the Public Library Association. It's a division of the American Library Association. It really turned librarians' worlds on their head. I was a children's librarian long before all of this happened and got to live through the whole change. Most public libraries in the years before 2000 actually banned parents from story hour. We made them leave. Now we know that's probably exactly the opposite of what we should be doing, but you live and you learn. But understand in this world today where so many different schools are going to a family support system in their reading programs, even public libraries didn't allow parents into reading programs, never mind schools. It's a whole different world, and if you didn't grow up in it, it's hard to understand how big those changes really are. But for all of that, Every Child Ready to Read did focus right on those pre-reading skills. What do I mean by pre-reading skills? Here's the big six. These were the ones that were pushed very hard in Every Child Ready to Read, directly come out of mostly Chall and Newman's work. Common words you hear every day, use every day, like phonological awareness. I'm sure that just rolls off your tongue every day. Letter knowledge, print awareness, print motivation. These were the terms. These are what every child was supposed to need before they got to kindergarten if they were going to learn how to read. And so we created all these flyers and these handouts. We gave them to parents and said, here, you have to teach your child phonological awareness. You can imagine what the response was. Again, I know because I was a children's librarian when all this happened. We'll get to how crazy that sounds a little bit later. But here, directly from the Every Child Ready to Read documentation, these are the guiding principles of Every Child Ready to Read. And no one, even to this day, has any arguments with any of this. Reading is an essential life skill. Remember, it came out of a time period where we thought if our children didn't read, they couldn't compete on the international stage. So that's the beginning of it all. Learning to read begins at birth, which is something we learned from those brain image technologies that were suddenly at our disposal. Parents and caregivers are a child's first and best teachers. Boy, that was a revelation back then. Now it is considered so cliche, and by the end of the day, I will tell you that part of that statement is wrong. Lifelong learning is primary role of the public library. Remember, this is a public library program. This is where the world I come from. And public libraries, first and foremost, had to change what we did before we went out there and tried to change what schools were doing. And then Every Child Ready to Read is a parent education initiative. It is not about kids. In fact, in my job, I'm discouraged from working with children, which is kind of funny. I do work with children on occasion, but my bosses would be much happier if I worked only with adults or with children and parents together. But because that's what we know now really makes the biggest difference. Here's those problems. Every Child Ready to Read was followed very quickly by a second edition because we had to fix some things. Obviously, the terms we were using, educational jargon, was not only making it hard for parents to relate to the program, but specifically the parents that needed us the most. We'll find out as we go along, and you probably can guess at this point that socioeconomic status is one of the major indicators for school success, especially in reading. So putting a lot of heavy terms out there in the way of parents that may themselves not be all that educated or whose first language might not be English probably wasn't a very good idea. So we cleaned up all of that. We went from the skills that children were supposed to learn to the activities that actually built those skills. Because one of the things that we found is wonderful. You can tell children they have to build their kids' vocabulary. Great. The problem was we didn't have any method for how to do that. We would just tell parents, you should do this. The second incarnation of Every Child Ready to Read focused entirely on how we build those skills and made it far more useful. And as a practitioner, I was very, very appreciative of this. Key bit of the research, remember that was that huge body of research that was being used by a bunch of different people because it could be used in so many different ways. We finally focused on part of that research that said not all of the things that we need to teach kids are equal. And the idea of constrained and unconstrained skills came out. There's a reason we use those very uncomfortable terms. Nobody uses the word constrained and unconstrained skills in real life. The reason is because the terms that everyone was using were so politically charged at that point that nobody wanted to be involved in it. This is some of the background that you may not know every day as you go through this. But before Every Child Ready to Read 2, there was a lot of argument about whole language versus phonics instruction. And the problem is those terms now carry so much implication and so much extra baggage that they're relatively meaningless. Constrained and unconstrained basically comes down to whole language versus phonics skills. And you don't ever want to get into that argument because people fall on one side or the other, and the fact of the matter is children, of course, need both. But Every Child Ready to Read 2 is going to acknowledge that the whole language side of it, the unconstrained skills, are more important for educators to be focusing on. We still will deal with phonics, but it's not going to be the center of what we do. And the other great part about Every Child Ready to Read 2 is it is entirely environmental. It says it's not so much important to sit kids down and teach them things, it's to put them into an environment where they learn language naturally. And kids learn language so much more naturally when you put them in those kinds of positions. All right, so there's the new iteration. Every Child Ready to Read second edition came out in 2011. I told you Susan B. Newman would show up again. She probably knows more about emergent literacy than anyone alive right now. And she's part of the continuation. She was in that early research from the beginning and right through the writing of Every Child Ready to Read 2. So you'll see her name around quite a bit. She actually wrote the handbook for it. So when you study Every Child Ready to Read, the program itself, you're going to be reading Susan Newman. Here's those 5 practices. I said before, it's not so much the skills, it's how you attain them. And the best part is you can walk up to any parent in the world and say, these are the things you should be doing with your kid. Talking, singing, reading, writing, and playing. Other than singing, most parents would say, well, I do that with my kids anyways. A lot of parents don't like to sing, but it's an important part of it. The best part is these are very familiar types of activities. Everyone knows what you're talking about. The point we're constantly making with parents is that you do these things anyways, but you probably don't think about how to get as much language into them as you can. Focusing on how to add language when you talk, when you sing, when you read, when you play, that's what really makes Every Child Ready to Read such a valuable tool these days. Best thing is, even though I work entirely with children under the age of 5, these practices are things that you can use all the way through life. In fact, I end up training adult literacy teachers. That's the other half of the department at the Tulsa Library that I work in, is the adult side. I train their tutors on using exactly these processes to help 50-year-olds learn to read, because they're all just as useful for a 50-year-old as they are for a 2-year-old. And really the focus now is on building a language background, building understanding of words and understanding of concepts so that when children do learn how to decode, they actually know what the words are that they're decoding. You'll hear a lot of argument out there. Part of the research block from the 80s and 90s talks about learning how to decode words that don't mean anything as a very valuable skill, because that will ultimately add to your vocabulary. That's how you learn new words. Well, that's true, but the fact of the matter is that's not how most people learn words. Most people learn what the word means first, then they learn what it looks like. So we will emphasize that side of it. Some of the research basis, you can take a look at a lot of it. This is, again, directly from the documentation for Every Child Ready to Read. Really shows you where our focus is. We have to get children early. Children's reading success starts with positive language and literary experiences beginning at birth. We now know, of course, that children start picking up language skills even when they don't understand. You should be reading to your child actually before they're born because they can hear you. The rhythm of language, the intonation of language is so very important that you can start developing that even before the child understands words. If they learn those skills early, then they can focus on what we call those constrained skills. We're about to talk about that in just a minute. That part, the phonics side of it, is so important that you basically want to get all the work done ahead of time so that when they start learning phonics, they have a good solid base to work on and they can quickly get past the phonics stage. Children who start kindergarten ready to learn to read have greater success throughout their school years. This is the most controversial of all the things I'm going to talk about, or the things that come up in Every Child Ready to Read, because just a couple of years ago, a longitudinal study came out and said, hey, guess what? Learning early literacy skills is very important when you hit third grade and is not important at all when you hit sixth. All the longitudinal studies started coming back saying that the big bump that children got from early literacy disappeared by the time they hit sixth grade. And then 2 years later, more longitudinal studies said, but the bump comes back when you hit eighth grade. So that's the part that everyone's still arguing about. Most people, though, do concede children are better off having these pre-literacy skills. Focusing on them will do them good in the long run. And if nothing else, it'll get them learning to read earlier. And in these days where if you don't read by the time you're in the third grade, you're going to run afoul of No Child Left Behind. That in itself is a very important step. So here we go. Decoding and comprehension, the constrained and unconstrained skills. The constrained skills, decoding, put in the back of your mind that we're talking phonics here, and then never use that term again. These are what we now call constrained skills because they happen once. They happen in a very short period of time for most people, although when they happen does tend to vary. Once they're happening, they tend to go pretty quickly. You don't learn the alphabet more than once unless you're learning, in fact, different languages. But you learn the alphabet, you learn that letters are connected to sounds, you learn that letter construction can change sounds when you start putting two letters together. You learn vowel sounds and all those types of skills. That's something you do once. Once you have it, those are tools you carry for the rest of your life. As much as everyone's pressuring children to learn these things at certain benchmark times, all the research says that children learn these things when they're ready. There's nothing wrong with the 2-year-old who learns all of her letters, and there's probably nothing too scary about a second grader who hasn't learned all their letters yet. Children learn these things at different times naturally if we give them a chance to do it. We shouldn't be as concerned as we usually are about hitting it at certain times. The one thing to really remember is that learning your letters and learning phonology and learning all of those skills doesn't make you a reader. It makes you capable of reading, but it doesn't make you a reader. It's not an end in and of itself. The real skills we're talking about are the unconstrained skills. Comprehension, if you really want to use that old charged term, the whole language approach, the ability to see a word and understand what it means. To be able to see a sentence and understand naturally what that sentence is telling you. The most important thing about these skills is they start from birth or earlier, depending on how you want to look at it, and they continue the rest of your life. You're constantly learning new vocabulary. You're constantly learning new concepts. You're constantly learning how ideas come together into stories and what we call narration. All of that you learn once, and then you learn it again and again as it gets more complicated and broader and deeper, and it's something you will continue to learn for the rest of your life. It's probably the biggest job that educators have to face these days. certainly it's going to take more time, so we need to put more energy into it. And it's the kind of thing that pays off. Ultimately, children who just learn the skills don't get enough out of it to actually put them to work if we don't actually get them understanding what they read. That's where the joy comes from. That's where the fluidity comes from. That's where you create not just someone who can read, but someone who does read, a reader. And here it is again. I'm going to repeat myself over and over again because, well, for one thing, repetition is one of the key points of every child ready to read, so I should do it. It is not a program for children. For a long time, teachers and librarians said they had a job. They had to teach children how to read. Well, if you think that your job is to teach children how to read, stop and think about how many hours you're going to spend with any particular child. If you're a public librarian, you might get 30 minutes with a child every week for 4 years. If you're a teacher, hey, you might get 6 hours a day with a child for 42 weeks. But all that pales in comparison to the amount of time that most parents and caregivers are going to spend with their children. It's time for a little humility. Librarians learned a long time ago that teachers spend more time with kids. Our first job should be to take care of teachers. Teachers need to learn that parents spend a lot more time with their kids than they ever will. Their first job is to take care of parents. What we really should be doing is modeling good activities, because parents, there are no classes for parents that they have to take before they become parents. They don't know this stuff. You can tell them, oh, talk with your child, but they don't know necessarily how to add more language to how they talk to their children. So things like story hours, things like classroom book discussions, often what we're doing is we're modeling how to do good literacy activities. And so our hope is that the children will spend half an hour with us in a program, in a story circle, and the parents will see what we're doing and do the same thing when they get home and do it every single night. 30 minutes with us and then an entire week with their parents will do a whole lot more good. Things we constantly need to be telling parents and reminding them over and over and over again. You are your child's first teacher. You get them long before we do. And now with all that wonderful brain research that says 80% of the child's brain is already wired by the time they turn 3, well, if we don't see them until they turn 3, we only get a shot at 20% of their brain. Parents need to remember that they're teaching their children from the first day that they meet them. On top of that, sitting children down and teaching them is completely ineffective. Children, the younger they are, the shorter their attention spans. What you end up doing is spending 30 seconds doing a literacy-rich activity, and then they run off and make mud pies or throw rocks or climb trees, and they come back 2 hours later for another 5 minutes. That's something that only parents can take care of. There's no way that educators can take advantage of those short times the way that parents can. On top of that, parents know their kids, and they know when their children are ready for a new word, for a new concept, for a new idea, and they're there. They have an opportunity to teach at the most teachable moment. The concept of a teachable moment is itself only a generation old. So we're still dealing with what that means, but parents have much more opportunity to find those teachable moments, and they need to take advantage of it. On top of that, hey, there's a role modeling involved here. Kids look up to their parents, by and large, just so much more than they will ever look up to us. There's a connection there that we can't beat. Doesn't matter how good we are at teaching, if the children are not in a learning mode with us, then it's not going to do any good. They're more likely to be in learning mode with parents. And we need to remind parents of that over and over and over again, because so many parents will look at librarians, they'll look at teachers, they'll see us as experts, and they'll try to take a step back and say, here, you do this job. Well, our job isn't to teach your kids. Our job is to teach you how to teach them. On top of that, especially with at-risk children, whether that means boys, whether that means inner city, poor, any children that for some reason are behind or might fall behind in reading, they are more likely to be active learners because our educational system doesn't cater to active learners. So Children are active kind of creatures, especially the ones that need us the most. They enjoy doing things with their parents. The more active the parents can be, the better they can be. These vocabulary and comprehension skills that are so important. How many times have I said this now? It starts at birth. I think that's 4 already today. The more language experiences children have, the more words they learn, and the better they become at understanding the meaning of what is being said. That is a fancy word for saying get out of the house and get out from in front of the television. Television and all types of screen narrow language. It is just a hard and fast fact. The American Pediatrics Association has recently come out and said no child under the age of 2 should ever be in front of a screen. No screen time at all before age 2. Most of us believe that the reason they said age 2 is because if they said what they really meant, which is age 13, everyone would scream at them. The fact of the matter is, screens narrow language, and children need to have expanded language, not narrow language at that age. Get them out, get them experiencing new things. There used to be a belief that you had to teach children letters and teach them how to put together words early so they could learn a new word and say, what's that? And then learn a new idea. We now know from tons and tons of research that the opposite is true. Children are much more likely to learn an idea first and then bring the idea back to the written word itself. And so it is more important to get out and do new things and experience new things and hear new words and hear new language than to be focusing too early on learning how words get put together. That's the heart of Every Child Ready to Read 2. And Every Child Ready to Read 2 really focuses on literacy practices, not skills, not activities, not one-time things, but things that can be done over and over and over again. Repetition is so important, and literacy has to be a habit. It has to be something you do every day. It has to be integrated in everything else that you do. We sort of get that early on, and that no one has a problem reading the same picture book to a 1-year-old 400 times. By 500, most parents get a little bit tired, but we understand that children like to hear the same book read over and over again. And then they turn 7, they reach the 3rd grade, and we tell them they can't read that book because they've already read it. That goes against this idea of practice. We really want things to be done over and over again. You actually do learn more vocabulary, you do learn more sentence structure and story structure, and you gain much more confidence when you repeat things over and over again and do it regularly, every single day, at the same time every single day. Why? Because it really gets across the idea that this is important. If it wasn't important, it wouldn't come on every time at the same time. Even television shows come on the same day, every day, at the same time, every time. If television's that important, reading needs to be a lot more important than that. You tell that I'm not a big fan of television. All right, here's my take. This screen is entirely me, and you have every opportunity to ignore this if you would like, but this is what I'm out there trying to tell educators today, reminding them. Every Child Ready to Read, when it first came out, talked about what? The skills that children needed to learn. The beauty of Every Child Ready to Read 2, and I've got my letters messed up there, but Every Child Ready to Read 2 talked about how to build those skills, and that was very useful. Unfortunately, it still leaves parents at a bit of a loss because they use these practices, they use these skills or these activities over and over again, but they don't know how to tailor them to accomplish what they really want to do. So we need to be out there telling parents why they need to build these skills. And what's going to follow is my take on why and how we might fill these goals. That's not nearly as important as you deciding for yourself what goals are important and making sure that you communicate that to parents so that they're not just saying, well, I'm just following a script. Parents need to know what they're hoping to accomplish. And so here's my 3 goals. This is what I break every child read down to. When I talk to parents, especially when I have kids out of the room and I can just simply tell them, hey, this is what you're aiming for and how you're going to do it. Building understanding. This is the whole idea of understanding the world around you so that when you see it in print, it makes some sense to you. Largely, we're talking about vocabulary because it doesn't matter if a child learns how to decode the word alligator if they don't know what an alligator is. So get them to the zoo and show them an alligator before you try and write out the word alligator. On top of that, they need to understand concepts because when they start learning grammar and how a sentence is put together, if they don't understand what the sentence is meant to say, it's not going to make any sense to them. And that really goes against every bit of educational theory since John Dewey, where it was very child-focused, and the idea was we're going to build the skill in the child and they will understand the world around them. Now, it really does work the other way around. All right, how do you accomplish those things, especially using those activities that we talk about? Well, I tell parents all the time, when you talk to your children, from their first day, narrate your day. Can't be afraid to make yourself look silly. Stand there, washing the dishes can be a literacy-rich activity. If you simply describe everything that it is that you're doing, you're exposing your children to more and more and more words. That's going to come up again very, very soon, but the number of words they hear really, really does matter. And when they hear from someone that they know, that they feel close to, it'll sink in a whole lot better. Even before children talk, you can teach them how to hear and use words simply by babbling at them and then stopping and staring at them right in the eyes, because it gets across the idea that, oh, this is how talking works. I talk, you talk. I talk, you talk. An awful lot of children, one of the things that we're very concerned with these days is children learning to speak later in life than they used to. Everyone's always concerned when their 2-year-old is not already talking in complete sentences. It turns out that a lot of people really think that children are learning to speak later and later. Again, I blame screen time for that because they never get a chance to talk to the screen. The screen just talks to them. Parents can be taught to teach their kids how to talk back to them. And the biggest thing, building knowledge. This is something, if you've been through any education courses, you know, you don't teach a child something new, you teach them something based on what they already know. When a child gives you a word like cookie, you give them back a phrase or a sentence. Oh, you want a cookie? Once they get that, yes, I want cookie, you add a descriptive word. Or you add a comparison word. Do you want a big cookie? Yes, big cookie. Brown cookie? Yes, brown cookie. Do you want a cookie that's bigger than my hand? Just give me the silly cookie, mommy. And now their child is talking in complete sentences. That's how you build language and expose them to a lot more words. Singing is a big thing. A lot of people, this is the biggest pushback I get. Parents all the time say, hey, I don't sing. Why? Because I'm terrible at it. Well, one of the beauties of brain research is that children's hearing has not developed enough before they reach school age for them to hear fine distinctions in sound anyways. They can't tell that you can't sing. Now's the time to sing. When they're 10 and 11 and they're more discerning, you don't want to be singing to them then. You want to sing when they still think you sound wonderful. I'm the best example of that. I am tone deaf, and yet it's one of the things that I do. I do sing-alongs for the Tulsa Library. I'll bring my guitar out, and we'll yell and caterwaul and scream, and we'll have a great time. Playing is very important. That's how all animals, all organisms learn. They learn through play. Children learn through play. What they learn is all the skills they're going to need to have as adults. It's important that their learning be language rich, which is why the biggest piece of advice I give to parents all the time is the cheaper the toy, the better. And if it's not even a toy, it's probably the best toy in the world. Toys that are based on media, on TVs and movies, children will get the toy and invariably will simply play out the same activities that they saw on the screen. Whereas you give them a toy that doesn't relate to a movie or television or doesn't relate to anything at all, like a block or TV trays or, best thing of all, just random clothing, it makes them create their own stories. And then they will have much more language-rich encounters. And of course, the best way to build vocabulary to children is simply to read to them. If you think you read to your child enough, you probably should double it. If you're sure you read to your child more than anybody else in the world, you're probably getting close. There's no limit to how much good reading out loud to children will do. Second thing, learn story structure. So you build understanding and then you learn how stories are put together. Why? Because ultimately a child is going to learn most of his language by reading. And if they're reading narrative. If they're reading long form, they're going to read a whole lot more. But they still have to understand how stories are put together, and it is not at all natural. If you think that stories are natural, if you have that crunchy feeling from the 1970s that we're all born storytellers, listen to a 2-year-old tell a story sometime. And you will realize they have no understanding of how stories work. Everything is from one point to the next. The sky is blue. Squirrel. Look, there's a block over there. Daddy came home today. That's the way 2-year-olds tell stories, because they haven't learned. So expose them to as much story as possible. And that is where playing with those nondescript items really becomes valuable, because they have to come up with a story. They can't just simply repeat what's been put in front of them. The more you read to them, the more stories they're exposed to, of course. And of course, you can start children writing even before they can read. Drawing pictures is the pre-literate version of writing. We've been doing that since caveman days, and long before we had any writing systems, because pictures tell stories. Whether you're drawing pictures or putting them together, by taking pictures, or if children are just telling stories and their parents are writing the stories down for them. Get them creating their own stories early. They'll be better writers later. And if you have any question about how to do that, Ralph Fletcher is as good as they come. Read his stories on how to build writers. And last but not least, actually last but possibly most, develop a love of reading. Here's where that earlier statement, I said, how many years have we been saying that parents are the first and best teachers that children ever have? They're so brainwashed they actually believe it. And I ask parents all the time, who's your best teacher? And they answer, we are, thinking that they're about to get a lot of confirmation. And I tell them it's a wonderful thought, but they're wrong. A child's best teacher is going to be themselves. They will learn more by reading than their parents will ever teach them, because they'll do it a whole lot longer. The best gift parents can give children is a love of reading, because then they're going to become better readers themselves. Anything you can do to add good feeling, comfortable feeling, confidence, warm, friendly, fuzzy feeling about reading, do it. How do you do that? Children need to own their own books. And this is coming from a public librarian, where I say, you don't have to own your own books. We've got thousands of them. No, they need to own their own books. In fact, the literacy department, the family literacy part of the literacy department at Tulsa, that's 90% of what I do is I give away books. I go into classrooms and give them away at the rate of about 3,500 books a month. Because there are actual studies out there, and they're not causal studies, they're corollary studies, but the more books that children have in their homes, books that they call their own, the better they do in school. It's a simple corollary. It really does work. And most of the kids that I work with, we survey them when I start my programs at the beginning of the school year. Most of them don't own any books. And the vast majority of them don't own as many as 10 books. So during the course of the year, we at least double the number of books every child owns. That's how important it is to us. We put $50,000 a year into putting books into children's hands. We're committed to that. We think that really matters. Repetition is another wonderful thing that builds a habit of reading. Children feel so much better when they read a book if they know what's coming. They feel confident. In fact, most children, that's how they say they learn to read. The first time they say, hey, I can read, they hold up a book you've read to them 500 times and they read it back to you. Of course, all they did was memorize it, but they've built that connection to the book. One of the things that's very important, especially in this day and age of high stakes testing, is that most reading problems in America start in the 3rd grade. Even children who are well ahead in first and second grade, they hit third grade and suddenly their reading skills drop, their motivation drops, the amount of time they spend reading drops, and they become reluctant and resistant readers. Having that attachment to books is what's going to get them through what we call the third grade hump. That's a hard time, and you need to really have something. Very often, children, when they hit that hump, what gets them through it is they go back to the books that they loved when they were 3. And they'll go back and they'll read the same kiddie books over and over because it's a stress response. Build that sort of comfort level. And of course, writing is one of those fun and magical things. If you probably don't even remember, but if you don't know how to read, writing's magic. If you can scribble on a piece of paper, give it to somebody else, and that person can read your mind, that's magic. I know this for a fact. I didn't learn to read until third grade. I was well behind as a reader, but I was scribbling on pieces of paper from my earliest days of school. I thought writing was fantastic. I thought it was magical, and I hoped if I scribbled long enough, sooner or later it would turn into letters. And eventually it did. I now write books. That's part of my life is I write children's books. So get them hooked on writing early, not just reading, but writing as well. All right, I'm going to simplify it even more. We've gone from 6 skills to 5 activities to 3 goals. I'm going to give you 2 principles that wrap it all up. First and foremost, before children learn how to read, before they get to that constrained step, the only thing that matters is the number of words they hear and the number of words they say. The research, you've probably heard, it's been out in the news, 30 million words, the 30 million word gap. That's the difference between the number of words a poor kid hears by the time they turn 3 and the number of words a rich kid hears. And we all know that the poor kids are not going to do well in school and the rich kids are. That's just a fact of life. You want to change those stats, you surround your children with words. 30 million. Comes out to, I think I figured it out, to about 20 words a minute that children are awake. That's what you have to add. That's not the number of words they need to hear. That's the number of extra words that a poor kid needs to hear to make up the difference. So that's a lot of words. That's a lot of reading to kids. Once they do pass that constrained period, there's one and only one thing that matters when it comes to language development. It's how much time they spend with text. And, the seminal work, I promised you'd see Stephen Krashen again. If there's any book you can read to support emergent literacy, read The Power of Reading by Stephen Krashen. And by the way, take a peek at the references in the back, and you're going to see all that wonderful research from the 80s and the 90s. But that's what that entire book boils down to is once they learn how to read, the amount of time they spend with text is the only thing that really produces readers. It's not the type of books they read. It's not the quality, however you define that. It's not the genre. It's not even on-screen or off-screen, although I still think off-screen reading is probably better for them. It's the amount of time they spend with text. It's not even finishing books, which is really kind of funny. Everyone gets so upset with kids that will never finish a book. But you know what? If they read the first half of 50 books, that's about the same as reading 25 books. When it comes right down to it, it's raw numbers. So it comes down to that simple thing. How many words they hear, how many words they use, and then once they learn how to take the words off the page, it's how much time they spend with text. And the best thing is, those 6 skills that we talked about at the beginning, they make all of this possible. The 5 activities make it fun and enjoyable. The 3 goals, if you reach those 3 goals before a kid hits school, if they understand a large number of words around them, if they understand how stories are put together, and if they love reading, then eventually they will read on their own. They'll become their own best teachers, and they're much, much more likely to succeed. So that's my take on emergent literacy here in the age of every child ready to read. Best thing about being in school, of course, is you get to find all those people that know things that you can then talk to later when you get into the real world. And I'm right up here in Tulsa. I know most of you are probably in the central part of the state or scattered around. suppose you're doing this online. You could probably be in Alaska for all I know. But all my contact info is there. I'm always there to help. And this is all I do is take care of emergent literacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really informative and inspiring. I really appreciate you share your expertise with my students, and thank you for sharing your contact information so students might contact you if they have further questions or comments.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And you have a great day.
Oh, you
Bye.
too. Thanks, folks.